So, Attorney General, you get a lot of lawsuits involving the president about the endangerment, overlook, or overturn, whatever you want to call it, race data. Tell us what's going on with your suits against the president.
So we're currently at 53 lawsuits, and I'm grateful to have an incredible team of close to 700 folks in our Boston office, our New Bedford office, our Springfield office, our Worcester office, and then our newly opened satellite office in Lowell. And I don't do this work by myself. You think about filing one lawsuit, what that takes, but we're now at 53. We are pushing back against the federal overreach of this administration, the blatant violations of law by the president himself or his team, or their efforts to undermine our economy and cutting billions of dollars. So what am I talking about? They have tried to now go after $4 billion of Massachusetts investments. This is SNAP benefits, this is WIC, this is mental health grants, this is funding for NIH funding and clinical trials for cancer, this is public schools, this is jobs, this is climate, infrastructure, you name it. In our most recent lawsuits, which would be included here, we have protected over $3 billion of the $4 billion they've tried to take. The most recent ones have been us joining efforts to fight back against the illegal tariffs. In addition to that, pushing back against their recent efforts by the EPA to overturn the endangerment finding, which Massachusetts led on. We wouldn't have this endangerment finding that says greenhouse gases absolutely contribute to climate change without the leadership of Massachusetts nearly 20 years ago in Massachusetts versus EPA. So we're fighting to protect that finding and have that tool help us address climate change. Another recent lawsuit is to protect universities, where they're trying to now go after their data and try to use data against them, essentially trying to come up with some theory that somehow they're breaking the law. So we're fighting against this arbitrary request to get universities, as if they're not busy already, to give them data that is just sort of a meaningless request. Another one that is, two others that are really important, is fair housing. They're not only coming after our ability to fund housing projects, to bring about more housing in Massachusetts, they're also at the same time trying to undermine our efforts to legally fight back against fair housing law enforcement and discrimination by conditioning certain grants to our Commission Against Discrimination. So we're fighting back against that in one of our recent lawsuits. And then one other that I will mention that is equally important is fighting to protect our kids and our families and our seniors for all the grants that come from the USDA, which includes SNAP and WIC and other type of agricultural programming funding, critical not just for food, but the well-being of our kids, educators, providers. So there's a lot going on. I think what I want folks to end with, though, is this is a dark and gloomy time for so many families and so many people. The uncertainty you're seeing in the world and in Massachusetts and by our federal government that is not helping us but working against us is that if you feel alone or a sense of despair in this moment in time, know that you're not alone and that you have an attorney general and an attorney general's office that absolutely has your back. And we want folks to know that because we're mindful that these are really desperate and unprecedented and challenging times for so many.
A bunch of other Trump-related litigation or legal things. And by the way, if you have a question for the Attorney General, it's 877-301-8970 to call or text. Or if you're here, you can just go see Hannah. We voiced this to a number of people. Andrea Campbell, who you obviously know, former Secretary of Public Safety, former federal judge Nancy Gertner. There's no question that district court judges, federal court judges, have been on the side of the Constitution for the most part, not so much the Supreme Court in most cases. Are you frustrated by the fact that even when there are rulings against the Trump administration on your litigation or others, there is generally non-compliance by the administration and no sanction for non-compliance, even to the point where judges have found that the prosecutors have lied to the court? There's no contempt findings. There's nothing. Essentially, Trump waits it out, takes it to the Supreme Court, and hopes that he gets his nominees to vote with him. Is that a frustration for you, or?
I think the frustration by the team is, one, just the blatant violations of law by the administration. Put aside the lawsuits for a minute. We obviously engage with the Department of Justice. We engage with the U.S. Attorney's Office. We engage with our federal agencies to do the work. And when things go terribly wrong, we want them also to hold folks accountable who are doing the work without a standard of excellence, with no integrity, or with an attempt to break the law or just lie. And they have the tools to hold someone accountable. Just like if someone in my office went to the court and represented a lie, they wouldn't still be in the office, right? So we do have frustration around that. And then, of course, when it comes to our lawsuit victories, including in the context of SNAP or other resources that we have secured through a legal victory through the courts, then we have to go back to the court to file a motion for them to enforce, meaning to get the administration to comply with the very order. Absolutely frustrated by that, because it's more time and resources that we have to bring to bear to make sure our people get the resources they deserve and are entitled to. There are many judges, and I don't want to put them all in the same category, but there are many who are standing up and fighting back through very thoughtful decisions that will help us when we get to the Supreme Court on other cases, including our birthright citizenship case that's coming up very soon at the Supreme Court. And there are many that have threatened or gone farther when it comes to contempt. But I think we all want to see anyone, I don't care if it's in the judiciary, the legal field, an attorney general, legislature, corporate and business communities, regular citizens, everyone exercising some courage in this time and doing it with a sense of urgency, recognizing that it's not just about protecting the rule of law and resources for us right now. We were just talking about kids, right? Our kids. It's about protecting our state, our country, for the kids and the generations to come. And if we don't get this right in this moment in time, we're all in trouble. So this is the time to exercise courage, and I think more folks in the judiciary will do that.
One more thing about Trump, litigation not yet, but possible, and then we'll get to your calls at 877-301-8970. The Supreme Court readers believe that the conservative majority of the day on this question about whether or not ballots can be received after Election Day, if they're postmarked by Election Day, that the judges will rule for the Trump administration and the Republican National Committee and say they cannot, which also some people think jeopardizes early voting, which is a whole other issue. This would affect Massachusetts if they're right about the decision. I believe we accept ballots 3 days after the election, and you're nodding, as long as they're postmarked. So let's assume that they do rule against late receipt. Well, it's not late receipt. Receipt of mail-in ballots, even if postmarked by Election Day, they don't count. It's June 30th when they rule, theoretically, or early July. What do we do in November in Massachusetts?
Well, I don't want to assume that. I want to assume the opposite.
But you have to prepare for the worst-case scenario, as does the Secretary of State, I assume.
Yes, and the Secretary of State, who we obviously are representing in other pieces of litigation against the Trump administration, we'll communicate with, and he will absolutely get prepared, and he will be prepared. I will say one thing about our Secretary of State. He's the longest-serving Secretary of State in the country. He has incredible experience. His team is really good. But, of course, where we sit right now, based on the argument just happening, and so we will continue to have conversations to always prepare, is that we hope that the justices get this right. And so we're not actually... Yes, there's been reporting on this. Based on our analysis of the argument, we still have hope that the justices, including some of the conservative justices, could get this right and allow ballots to be counted after the receiving, allow them to be counted even after, of course, receiving them, as long as they're postmarked and other rules are complied with.
But it seems to, I don't mean to belabor this, but I will for one more second. Assuming a ruling comes down at the end of the term, let's say, for argument's sake, July 1st. July, August, the September, October, there are 4 months for people who are busy, as we were talking about off the air, begin dealing with cuts to everything they depend upon, from, cost of gas going up to all their personal budget things, healthcare. Chaos would ensue in a state like ours in Massachusetts. There are only so many people who would get the message, and isn't there an obligation on the part of Galvin and you to prepare people for the worst in advance, so that if it is to happen, they understand what they've got to do to have their vote count?
We always get prepared, right? We were prepared even for the Trump administration before he was sworn into office. We're always prepared. At the end of the day, there are fires right in front of us, and so we always are looking at, okay, what do we have to deal with right now? What do we have to deal with the next month, et cetera? That being said, I hope that in the deciding of this case at the Supreme Court, that they take in consideration not only the law, but also the practical implications of their decision if they get this wrong. The chaos and confusion that would disrupt not only Massachusetts elections, but other states, and how difficult in some contexts and places that have lesser resources, lesser human capital, how impossible that may be for folks to access the ballot. I hope they take that in consideration.
Let's take Peter from Rentham. You're first with the Attorney General. Welcome to the show, Peter. Hi.
Is it Peter from Wenham?
Oh, sorry, we made a mistake. It is you, Peter from Wenham.
Hi,
Welcome.
Peter. Thank you for calling.
Hi.
Oh, thank you. It's an honor. Attorney General, I'm a big fan of the new ADU law, but I believe my local officials are misunderstanding the law. I qualify.
By the way, we
to
should
have
say
a
accessory
maximum-
dwelling unit, granny flats is
Granny
what we call
flats.
them. But go ahead, Peter, so
Yeah,
people understand.
Exactly.
Go ahead.
I qualify to have the max size of 900 square feet, but I'd like to request a special permit to have 1,000 square feet to make it ADA friendly. But my local officials believe that if they allow me to have 1,000 square feet ADU, then I haven't exercised my right under the state law, and that they think I could sneak in another ADU law. But I believe it's a misunderstanding of the law, and I was hoping you could clarify that for me.
So can you actually stay on, Peter? We are in the weeds on all things ADU through our municipal law unit and other parts of the office, doing technical assistance, including with town council or various councils, because we have run across other constituents who have run into some challenges because of either people are misinterpreting the law. So Peter, because yours is so specific and we want to be helpful when we can you just stay on so we can get your number and we'll follow up ASAP?
Stay on hold. We'll get your contact info, and the AG's office will be in touch, Peter. Thank you much for the call.
We have a
301-8970.
We have a text from Jenna in Jamaica Plain who says she'd like to ask the Attorney General if or how she's collaborating with other states. I'm so worried about the SAVE Act passing and the ways the Trump administration can try to retain power for the Republicans in the midterms. What can the Attorney General, our state government, realistically do to push back against this and work with other states, especially swing states? The SAVE Act would just put a lot of requirements on voting.
So we're following this closely. We don't think it has a chance, but obviously there's always a possibility. But it's a tall order for him, especially given some of the rhetoric from some Republicans about this too. But we have current litigation in the election space with other AGs, including the one that was just mentioned that went to the Supreme Court, filing amicus briefs to support expanding, frankly, access to the ballot. So we were on top of this. If there's at some point a way in which we can mobilize. And it could be the SAVE Act, it could be him doing another executive order. We don't know. But we stay in touch with our federal delegation advocating through the legislature, and we also will mobilize and file a lawsuit if there's something that comes to bear, especially through an executive order that we can challenge.
You know, it isn't really your purview, or maybe it is, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a lot of fear about ICE agents being dispatched, not necessarily to the polls, or maybe to the polls, but to parts of cities and states where there's a lot of a population of people who came from another country, that's going to intimidate people who are citizens from coming to vote. That's not really your area, but is it something that people are talking about in Massachusetts?
It is. It's something people are talking about here. It's something people are talking about in other states. I think this is why folks in the legislature, including here, like the Black and Latino Caucus obviously just put out the PROTECT Act, which is working its way through the State House. There are other folks who are putting out all kinds of ways in which to hold ICE accountable, protect our immigrant communities, including in the context of elections. But folks are being prepared and mobilizing. I think the other message that we want to stress, which is not always easy to do, but I think important, is that when we're asking folks to exercise some courage right now, even in the midst of the fear they are facing, it's recognizing that those who are in positions of power are putting forth policies and putting forth not just policies, but taking action that is harming our people in very egregious ways. Like I mentioned our public schools earlier. Without our lawsuit, our public schools would not have opened on time. I mentioned NIH funding. That is critical to the Massachusetts economy, given the billions of dollars we receive. It's critical for clinical trials, biomedical research, real harm, and yet we still have to mobilize in this moment to protect our people. So we're asking the other folks to mobilize as well. Someone recently said, courage is contagious. And we hope that they will wait in the lines to vote and know that there will be people, including community efforts, where people are mobilizing to protect folks so they can access the ballot. And frankly, as someone who is standing in this identity as a black woman fighting to protect the 14th Amendment, knowing the history of the 14th Amendment and how folks fought to ensure that when formerly enslaved black folks were let go, I'll put that in quotes, in this country, people fought to bring about the 14th Amendment to make sure that rights and privileges were afforded to black folks who were formerly enslaved so they could benefit from the rights and the privileges of being a citizen. People died for the 14th Amendment to happen. Without the 14th Amendment, I can't become the first black woman AG of Massachusetts. I can't become the first woman of color elected statewide in Massachusetts. I can't vote in Massachusetts or anywhere. So I just pull on that history as more courage to get me to do what's necessary to fight back in this moment. And I just would encourage others to pull on either personal stories or some history where people had death at their door every single day, but did what was necessary, knowing they would never realize the fruits of their labor, but they did it for the next generation. We can do that in this moment in time, too.
Are you going to the No Kings rally on Saturday?
Yes,
Why'd you pause?
because I was waiting for the clap. Thank you, my
Very
people
good
in the
timing,
library.
Attorney
Yeah.
General.
For
We'll
those
get
listening, there's a crowd in the library.
got
It feels
it.
like a party.
I
It's
understand
nice
it now. Thank you
energy
very
in
much.
here.
Okay, we'll get
but
back
yes,
to
I'll be there.
calls in 1 second. One related thing about this PROTECT Act that's in the legislature. We've talked to you a lot about what the state has the power to do, basically a federal province immigration enforcement. But I may have asked you this last month, and if I did, apologies, but I don't remember the answer if I did. My take on this is that among the most important things that the Democrats are demanding is, one, that there be warrants in almost all cases if you enter somebody's home. And apparently Homan, as the border czar, has tentatively agreed to this. The other thing is face coverings. And I was stunned when a federal court in California knocked down the California face mask law, not because they said it's not the state's business. They said, the judge in this case said, the only reason we knocked it out was because it didn't apply to all law enforcement officials in Massachusetts. Why doesn't Massachusetts add to the PROTECT Act or file legislation, or why don't you, that says no law enforcement official in Massachusetts, federal, state, local, may wear a face covering when doing their job? It seems to me that's a huge part of the terror aspect of ICE and CPB.
First, I absolutely agree with you, and have come out even, and we talked about this at one point, face coverings for those ICE agents or CBPB.
Yeah, I got it backwards too.
Yeah.
Border Patrol.
Border Patrol agents who are going into our community and frankly not bringing about or advancing public safety, but just bringing about tremendous fear. And we've seen the cases here in Massachusetts and have said, when you come in masked with that lack of transparency, and also, of course, if something goes wrong, it's difficult to hold people accountable. They shouldn't be wearing masks. And as you know, I left the radio and immediately got blasted, I think, by the U.S. Attorney herself. Mm-hmm. And I would push back even on her and say, when our law enforcement goes out to do operations and work, they don't wear masks unless there are unique operations or case investigations that require it. And they're explicit about that. So if we did an investigation and afterwards people said, well, why were they wearing masks? We should have some specific explanation for the public as to why. But the norm is not them going out and wearing masks as they do criminal investigations in our casinos, outside of our casinos, everywhere. But in the context of what we're seeing from ICE, we think they should change that behavior. The difficulty with states passing something like that is the enforcement piece. Because of the Constitution, federalism, it makes it more difficult. This is really a law that should come from the feds. And
I know,
this,
but the
as you know,
California
they're
federal
working on it.
Courts seem to say it's okay if it applies to every law enforcement official in the state.
And that's a possibility that we can explore, but at the end of the day, enforcement is still difficult. And why is that? Someone recently said to me, for example, having local law enforcement arrest an ICE official. You have to put yourself in the shoes of a law enforcement official who didn't sign up to be arresting another law enforcement official, and to do so against a backdrop where the folks that should be holding them accountable is the federal government. So putting sort of the federal government, our U.S. Attorney's Office, against me, against local enforcement, is a very difficult place to be, a very hard place to be. We want a federal government that holds their agents accountable. If something goes terribly wrong, they are arrested, they are prosecuted like anybody else for misbehavior, just like we would do the same.
So will you explore that and talk to us about it next month?
Well, we have already talked about it in many ways. I think there are several iterations of bills in the State House, so we can talk about it.
So
But at
would
the end
you
of the day,
support legislation that banned masks on all law enforcement people?
I can't say all law enforcement ban all masks for the very reason I just described.
Well, with exceptions in certain circumstances that are defined.
I've already come out publicly for that.
Okay, then why don't you file legislation to that effect?
Because at the end of the day, we can file that legislation, Jim. I don't like to just do things for the sake of doing things. I think too many politicians do that. What's the practical impact it would have on the ground? We pass a law like that. How do we enforce ICE agents that are under the authority of the federal government? We have no authority. I have authority over my state police folks in my division, not them, to actually not wear a mask. That's very difficult, and I want the public to understand that. Even as we're pushing for solutions, which we will, still sometimes the practical implication is opposite of what they want. And I don't think politicians do a great job of being truthful about what they're doing and the impact it will have.
877-301-8970 is our number.
John from Gardner, thank you for calling.
Hey, John.
Good morning, good folks. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
I think one thing with immigration we can hope for is that Mark Wayne Mullen gets angry with Stephen Miller and pinches his little racist head off. But I digress.
Okay,
Do you want
God
the Attorney
bless
General's
John.
opinion on that?
God bless John. And first of all, I often say that I digress.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
And I
John.
love that he said, hello, good people.
What's your question,
John.
John?
Attorney General, and I want us to do this politely, but when your explanations of the audit situation comes up,
Yes.
I mean, obviously I'm a lay person. I tried to think of myself as not too much of a dope, but it sounds like a bunch of legalese nonsense, frankly, that just seems like the powers that be circling the wagon. And I think the governor, by the way, has not gotten a bit of attention on this that perhaps she should have. In the open secrecy laws in this state, I mean, I could go on and on.
So what's your question, John?
It helped dissuade me from the fact that it seems like the powers that be are just circling the wagons to prevent upsetting the status quo. Thank
By the
you.
way, John, thanks. Just so people understand, what John's calling about is the question that passed on the ballot a year and a half or so ago that would require the auditing of the legislature. It got close to 72% of the vote, and there's been a standoff between the auditor's office. We discuss this with you every month, and your office as to whether or not you will represent her or allow a special attorney general to represent us now before the state's highest court. I'm sorry, take it away.
So two things. John, thank you for the question. I fully supported question one. I voted for it, and I have been explicit on that. We are at a place where there are two things going on. The first is there's a lawsuit right now that was filed by the auditor using, frankly, my former Attorney General opponent, Shannon Liss-Riordan, to file a lawsuit against the legislature. We are representing the legislature in that suit. Why? Because the auditor and any other state agency does not have the authority under our Constitution or laws to file an unauthorized lawsuit without the permission of me and my office. That's my job, to enforce the law of the Commonwealth. So when I represent state agencies, they need permission before they go to the court. It's been around the laws for centuries. So we are defending that. That will do nothing to move the audit forward. If anything, it's going to delay it. And that's unfortunate. The second piece is the audit itself. Let's get it done. I absolutely agree with you, John. We can. And I know we can. I even called the auditor recently after seeing her in Worcester. I have yet to hear back from her. I called her. Why? In the beginning, when she said she was going to do this audit, she kept really referring to it as a performance audit, even in the correspondence to her office. And we made it clear that that is sort of legislative business and affairs. There are constitutional limitations on the auditor to getting some of that information. But most recently in Worcester, when I saw her in Worcester, she has changed that. She said she was wanting to do more of a financial audit and wants the financials and possible state contracts, those two things. I called her, I've not heard back, to say to her, I think there's a pathway forward. The legislature, some of the legislature think you can't audit at all. I think you can within the Constitution. And so I called her, I haven't heard back, because I actually think we're not far apart. There's a pathway forward to get this done if she wants to get it done. Call me back. And then the last piece I will mention is, and I think this is important to John's point because it is legal in nature, is none of us, me as the Attorney General or the auditor, have unlimited authority. I can't sue anyone just because I want to. The Constitution doesn't allow it. Case law doesn't allow it. Even Trump, in certain cases, as much as I may not like his behavior, I can't sue him if it's not illegal. The auditor, the same. She does not have unlimited authority to audit whoever or whatever she wants. And in the context of the legislature, there are constitutional limitations. And my job is to enforce the Constitution. So we can move this forward if she can say, when you say this financial audit now, what is it you want? Are there constitutional limitations to that? And the answer is either yes or no. If it's yes, what are those? If it's no, fine. Because the court will want to know that.
But you've said, Attorney General, with all due respect, you've said that she has to, you've told us, that she has to tell you everything that she might ever want to audit before you can rule on this, which is an impossibility.
No, it's not impossible, actually.
How can she know what will happen in the future?
Then we can go back to the court and re-up a request.
That's exactly what I said to you a few months ago.
No, we can go back to the court and re-up the request. But at the outset, if you want me as the Attorney General representing the Constitution to go into court, you have to be crystal clear on what you want to audit.
Okay, so let me be clear. There are a couple things here. The request that she had before the state's highest court was that they appoint a special Attorney General, which you have not done. Bob Cordy, former justice on that court, wrote a piece in Commonwealth Beacon. It's one thing, this is from him, it's one thing for Campbell, the Attorney General, to take lawmakers' position on the matter and or her office to represent them. It's another for her to take the extreme view that the auditor cannot hire her own attorney. So, Attorney General, I was made question when you said you're very close with the auditor on these things. So just so I'm clear and listeners are clear, if the auditor tomorrow summed up everything she sent you, because I'm sure she'll say, I sent you everything you're already asking for, and said, here are the 11 things I want, you'd say, these are constitutional, these are not. If they're constitutional things on the list, you would then represent her if the legislature resisted the audit on those issues? No?
Two things.
Yep.
I saw the auditor in Worcester. The auditor at the Worcester caucus said she wanted two things in the audit. That is different from what she asked for before.
I said if she summarized everything.
So if she wants those two things, I called her after it. I want to emphasize this to the public because this is now getting dangerous to the point where the vitriol out there on this issue is really sad and disheartening to watch. I called her to say there is a pathway forward. We are not far apart. We both agree the legislature can be audited. My job, not hers, is to enforce the Constitution in auditing the legislature. So if the two things you mentioned at Worcester are what you're looking for, great. The other question you need to answer, though, is do you think you have a constitutional limitation on auditing the legislature? She can say, no, I don't. Okay. And then she could also say, yes, I do. Great. We have to then present that to the court. You can't go into the court and not have an answer to that question. And she's never answered that question.
Okay.
We even gave you that question, Jim, to ask her. She's never answered that question.
One last thing. Yeah,
and it's not hard. It's not a laundry list. It's not complicated.
Understood. You mentioned the vitriol, and you voted for this question. You've told us repeatedly. And I assume you would agree if you're one of 72% of the voters in the state who voted for something that's being frustrated, and you are the only person who has the power as of the moment to have it go forward.
No, the auditor does.
No, well, I understand that. But you're the one making the decision that as of the moment you'll not represent her. We spoke to former federal judge Nancy Gertner a month or so ago and asked her if she was willing to serve, and a very respected federal judge who, by the way, even contributed to your campaign, we learned afterwards. Despite that fact, the auditor said, fine with me. You rejected her as a mediator to try to resolve this issue.
We don't need a mediator, Jim.
But it's been a year and a half and there's no deal.
It's been a year because the auditor has dragged it on. And case in point, in Worcester, which was only a few weeks ago.
This is a Democratic convention in Worcester? Is that
it was a caucus in Worcester.
I'm sorry,
she spoke before me, and then I spoke afterwards.
Okay.
And she said, it's like a family fight. And I said, I want to address it because the auditor just spoke. She asked for two things, a financial audit. That is very different from what she has asked for previous, including correspondence we got in January of this year from her attorney. In that, and over the past year, she's asked for a performance audit, which is involving activities by the legislature, some of which are unconstitutional, which I made clear to her before the ballot question. So if people in the 72%, and by the way, I'm one of the 72%, and I can still express myself without beating someone over the head or saying really mean things, it's not personal, I want to get this done, then she has to call me back, post the audit question in Worcester. Call me back. I said, if it's financial, there's a pathway forward. You have to answer questions, though, because why? I don't make the determination ultimately. I give her a lawyer. She goes to court. But the court will ask. And we cannot go into a court representing anything without a legal argument, a legal claim, or some evidence. The court would knock us out. Just like if I went in there and said, I'd like to sue Donald Trump for certain activity and didn't have a legal argument, they would say, thank you. Why are you here? It's simple. If it's a financial audit, great. Do you think your authority is limited by the Constitution or not? Someone asked me that question. Andrea Campbell, as Attorney General, is your authority limited by the Constitution? Yes, it is. And why is that? Because this says so. She has not answered that question.
Understood. I hear you.
Okay, just one last thing about this. You know, I'm not a lawyer. You guys are both lawyers.
I'm not really much
I'm
of a lawyer.
where John is that called. I'm a regular person.
Yes, thank you, John.
And we have the most secretive laws in the state, in the country. Massachusetts is extremely secretive. The legislature, the governor, and the judiciary, they're all they're exempt from the public records laws.
Only state in America.
Only state in America. And we, I would say, have a legislature that isn't popular because they don't get a lot accomplished. So when 70% of the people want to get in to see what the legislature's doing on financial issues or other issues or a lot of the shady stuff that I think goes on up there, to the average person, it looks like you are stonewalling along with the legislature that's stonewalling, while Diana DiZoglio is trying to get the people's will done. And I think that's the problem. We get buried in this legalese. And so you say to yourself, as an average citizen, what is the problem? If you wanted to help her get the audit and the legislature wanted to help her get the audit, we would have some kind of audit, and we don't.
I absolutely agree with you. And I feel like now I'm sort of in the middle of this. The legislature thinks they can't be audited, it's unconstitutional. The auditor thinks, I can audit them. And I'm in the middle saying, you can audit them, that absolutely. You have some authority, but depends on what you want. So if, for example, and I said this in Worcester, if you wanted the speaker's emails and certain things through the audit, you can't get that, it's unconstitutional. If you wanted some financials, you could probably get that, and some of that actually is available now on the comptroller's website. So for me to go into the court, to give her a lawyer to go into the court, to resolve the legal dispute, I need the auditor to tell me specifically not only what she wants and not change that.
I get that.
And then the other thing is, what are the constitutional limitations? We have to be on the same page on that piece.
But it almost doesn't matter because people are so upset about this.
I get that.
Three-quarters of the text we get today.
But I want the people to know, I supported question 1 too. I voted for question 1, and I absolutely believe and want them to be honored in their vote. The only person right now that can move that forward is the auditor. And I don't want to let her off the hook. And what I mean by that is, why is it the auditor? You need to answer the question of, is it the financial audit? Great. Before it was a performance audit, now it's a financial audit. If it's financial, if it's a certain type, great. The second is, do you think you have constitutional limitations? This is what the court would ask. Because and if you say, no, I don't, or yes, I do, then what's your legal argument? Because I hate to say this to the voters, it is a legal matter now that will be required by a court to resolve
We have to move on. One last thing, because it's related to the secrecy, and then we'll take calls on other topics.
But I don't disagree. And even on the public records, on the city council.
Well, speaking of public records, she also has a ballot question now the legislature is trying to weasel out of even before there's a vote, which would extend repeal public records. They wouldn't be able to escape public records laws in the governor's office and the legislature. The governor
and the
told
judiciary.
Well, I don't think that's covered by her particular.
I'll just say,
the governor
I was on the
said
city
she's
council.
voting for that.
I will say I was on the
city. Are you voting for that question?
I will say many of these ballots are still before.
Yeah.
There are cases against these ballot questions, so I can't take a position now. But the public records request and expansion, I was on the city council in Boston pushing for the exemptions to go away. So I'm on the record already for expanding the public records law. So I want to make that clear. And to your point, Marjorie, as I was talking to my husband about this very issue on the ballot question, I absolutely agree with you. I'm looking for a solution between these two parties to get it done. And I'm telling the auditor, who I think is more pushing for a fight, we don't need a fight. We're not far apart. I just need you to call me back. We could get this done.
Yeah, I think the head of the legislature could help too. I mean, I think Mariano and Spilka could help too. It
If
doesn't
they
seem
wanted
like
to
they're
change their position, but they
making
have
an
their
effort.
They have their own legal argument, okay, but they've at least stated it. The auditor hasn't.
Okay, she's going to disagree, but we've heard you and we appreciate
Well, ask
your
her the
response.
question,
We
Jim.
will ask her the question.
Thank
have our
you. You
word.
said that last time.
We're going to do it again. We've done it every time. We try to serve, and that's why I think a mediator like Federal
No,
Judge
you can
Gertner
do
would be
it,
great.
Jim. Just
Mark
ask her
and
that
Holden.
question.
Mark and Holden, you're on with the Attorney
Hi,
General. I'm sorry to
Mark.
hold you up so long, Mark. Hello, welcome.
Oh, that's quite all right. Hi, guys.
Hi.
A pleasure, Attorney General, to speak with you. Actually, as an aside, I have a plan for the auditor if she wants to get the audit done. If she can sneak in and get it done within 5 months, I know exactly when she could do it. Huh?
He's talking about the legislature's 5-month vacation. Okay, let's move on.
exactly
I'm
it.
obsessed with
All
that
right,
too, as you know, Mark. Go ahead, keep moving.
I do. Yeah, speaking of vitriol, I'm calling about the MBTA Communities Act, and I'm from Holden, one of the towns that is not yet in compliance.
Yep.
And we voted down 2 plans so far, and the vitriol's been crazy out here. I guess my question is 2 parts. One, as the lawsuit that you filed goes ahead, are you still working with the towns to try to get them into compliance? And 2, it seems to me that some of the towns, I won't mention any names, are trying to get in compliance by zoning areas that will be very, very difficult to develop. So they'll be within the letter of the law, but avoiding the intent. So I don't know if you're aware of that or if there's any
Thank you, Mark, for the
way of
question.
looking at it.
Mark,
Yes,
thanks.
we continue to work with the towns even as the lawsuits go on with the hopes that we can bring them into compliance. And then the second piece that we remained, of course, concerned about is obviously once you pass compliant zoning, it does not automatically mean that you're going to be building housing for the people that need it the most. And so we are working through our new housing affordability unit to help communities bring about more housing. And that may be participating in zoning conversations where people may be trying to block housing that is legally permissible, including for elders or certain populations of people. ADUs is a great example of that. These are now as of right dwelling spaces. So we're doing a lot of outreach to towns on ways in which to expand that housing. So we're following that too. But the short answer, Mark, is absolutely continuing to work with towns on the implementation of the MBTA communities, because that actually, outside of the Trump work, housing and affordability remains the #1 issue in Massachusetts.
Mark,
so
thank you for your
Mark.
call. We really appreciate it.
So, Attorney General, September 13th, 2024, a state police recruit, Enrique Delgado-Garcia, 25 years old, died after suffering head injuries during this boxing match at the training facility for the state police. The 16-month investigation, the independent counsel, David Meyer, has ended with some indictments. Tell us what happened.
So yes, we lost Enrique. It was tragic, and of course remain in touch with his family and the community, and even fellow recruits who were in the training academy who are now on the job, who served with him in the academy who are now on the job. Just horrific and a very sad and shocking loss. It shocked everyone. That being said, I appointed an independent investigator in David Meyer, and David Meyer followed the evidence and the facts available to him at that time and indicted 4 folks on the state police. And so that is proceeding. And I can't say more than that because it's still an open, it will be an open criminal case, and they will be arraigned at some point in the near future, which he has more details about. And we'll continue to follow it.
One follow-up question on that, though, is while there were 4 people on the ground who were indicted who will have trials or whatever the result is, as has been said by a number of people, obviously there were people in charge who Meyer didn't believe the behavior of which rose to criminality. I didn't articulate that well, but you know what I mean. But who obviously had some responsibility that they may not have met because didn't meet because there's a dead state trooper. We don't know who those people are. And so as a result, the same supervisors who allowed this criminal behavior on the ground are still potentially, unless they've retired or something, still on authority. Wouldn't it be wise for the public safety and the safety of future state troopers to be that we know who these people are?
So I want to take even a
Do you
step.
understand at least what I'm saying? I'm
I
sorry
absolutely
it wasn't.
do.
Okay.
No, I want to take a
Thanks.
step back because one thing David made clear when we announced these indictments by the grand jury is that there was no intent or malice by these folks to target Enrique, to go after him, and to harm him. And that's an important fact to lift up, or facts to lift up, and he did the same. It was more reckless conduct, lack of action, failure around certain things. And that will play out in this criminal case against these 4 individuals. And based on the evidence and the facts that he had and presented to the grand jury, this is where he ended up. Over the course of that criminal case, who knows what else will be learned by David as he is doing this, but this is where the facts and the evidence have led him, and this is where he'll follow based on all that he learned, and more that will come out during the criminal case.
But what if it doesn't? What if the names of the supervisors who arguably
we will
knew
see.
about
More
this?
will come out during the criminal case, but for the integrity of the case for all parties, that's all I can say.
Okay. We're talking to the Attorney General for another 15 minutes, 877-301-8970. Anonymous texter. Now that home improvement season is here, what's the state doing to stop door-to-door crooks from scamming homeowners using fake websites, bait-and-switch tactics, on and on?
Well, I would say if anyone is being defrauded or a scam is coming to your door, call us. We investigate all kind of folks who are going to door and selling products. If there's a consumer protection issue, we're here to help.
And speaking of scams, these prediction markets, we've been talking about this briefly. This is fairly new to us. This is the thing where you should explain what they are and tell us what you're attempting to do, Attorney General.
So we just had a huge victory against Kalshi, which is saying that they don't do sports betting because they're doing it in these prediction markets. But we are saying, no, that's still sports betting. And we had a huge victory, even though other states had pursued them. We had a huge victory recently where the court made it clear that, no, they are engaging in sports betting. And as a result of that, you have to go to our gaming commission and get a license. In addition to that, you also have to take steps, as we require all legal operators to do, to protect folks against the public harms from betting, the addiction and public health outcomes, including for our kids. We have a whole sports betting coalition involved just directed towards young people around misinformation. And so we're continuing to follow this case. It's a still active case. It's still ongoing. But I think now other states and other folks are looking at legislative solutions, even at the federal level, to go after some of these folks that are participating in betting, but trying to suggest that it's something different.
We have a text here involving TransCare regarding the federal ruling that HHS cannot threaten, Health and Human Services cannot threaten healthcare systems that provide care for trans youth. New York has ordered hospitals that complied in advance to resume care. Will Massachusetts be following this model as major healthcare systems like Bay State and Fenway retreat from providing these services, essential services for people under 19?
So we have a lot of cases in this context of protecting gender-affirming care, and we remain in touch with various healthcare institutions. Many are still providing care in different ways. We're also mindful of how difficult and challenging the jobs are for these institutions, including Boston Children's. Not just the lawsuits and threats coming from the federal government, the threats coming from people and directly to the providers. So we're over-communicating with these particular healthcare institutions to ensure that folks have access to service. And if a particular institution, for financial reasons or other considerations that are painful for them as they make these decisions, cannot provide care, we're doing what we can to still ensure there's a continuation for care for families throughout the state. It's a difficult time for anyone who's in healthcare, so we're doing our best to fight back.
When you're talking about attacks on providers, did you mean like physicians that are involved in doing this? They're getting threats?
Absolutely. I remember some of the earliest calls with Children's Hospital in particular, and I went to visit, and I've since gone to other healthcare institutions, and just sat and listened to providers who were providing all types of health care and the threats they were getting on social media or the other ways in which they were being targeted, having to even change their license plates, other things to protect them. This was the state of affairs in terms of that hatred and vitriol. We don't just see it at the federal level when folks are attacking the LGBTQ plus community or trans youth. They're targeting these providers in horrific ways. And so we're doing everything we can to protect them.
Carolyn in Wenham, you're on with the Attorney General.
Carolyn?
Thank you much for the call. Caroline.
Caroline.
Hi, Caroline. Sorry.
Hi.
Hi.
That's okay. I'm calling in regards to Todd Lyons, who is the second in line behind Tom Homan, and he's a resident of...
He's the acting director of ICE.
On the North Shore.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
He's a resident in the North Shore. And people that are just going out and putting signs out saying we support our neighbors and just standing up for their local residents, have been attacked online, have been doxxed by nasty groups. They've been threatened. Families have been threatened, including military families. And I just want to know why he has protection and regular residents do not. And is there anything we can do to help our local Massachusetts residents against an acting ICE director?
So thank you, Caroline, for the question. Thank you for everything you're doing, because as you just mentioned, it's not without risk. And when you say protection, yes, we are afforded, I say as public servants, some people are afforded certain protections. But that being said, if something rises to criminal or other liability, there's an opportunity to hold them accountable. And I think one of the things, when we launched our storytelling portal recently, or even the platform recently with the governor, particularly in the context of immigration, we're encouraging people to reach out to us, right? Not to just hold their stories or to leave it online, but to actually reach out to us. We are monitoring what we're receiving, because if it does rise to the level of being able to bring a case to hold people accountable for certain actions, we will, including in the immigration context. And then we also recognize it still can be very difficult to do that if people are staying behind the First Amendment, their free speech, and their disagreement. But that being said, Caroline, we're encouraging folks to find us with some of these newer tools and platforms to report some of this to us so that we can hold them accountable.
Caroline, good luck. Thank you for the call. We've talked to you a lot about your proposal. Can't remember the name of it, but it includes bell-to-bell, no cell phones in schools, which I know, what's it called?
The Study Act.
Study Act. Thank you, Jamie. I appreciate that. That's why he's there. He fills in the blanks when I have them. I have plenty of them.
The Study Act, which
thank you, the Study Act.
want to pass.
Which overwhelmingly, the public sports, overwhelmingly teachers support. And shockingly, I believe it passed the Senate, and we're waiting for the House to wake up and do something. What's going on?
So I actually love that you brought this up, because in addition to all the other work, we're doing everything we can to protect our kids, particularly when it comes to tech. Everyone should be concerned about social media platforms. In New Mexico, my counterpart, Democratic AG in New Mexico, just had a huge jury verdict in their case against Meta. We still have active litigation against Meta and TikTok to hold them accountable for the platforms causing harm through their algorithms and designs. And that's ongoing. But we recognize lawsuits can take a very long time. So we filed the Study Act with the goal of doing a few things. One is holding tech companies accountable for the ways in which we are trying to do so through the lawsuits, which is age verification, for example. Make sure that works. The ways in which they have infinite scrolling. There are ways in which they can change the design features to make our kids less addicted. And they haven't done that. So the Study Act speaks to some of those ways we would require through a legislative solution if you operate in this state. The second is, we know if you're putting addictive platforms on already addictive devices, you can't hold the companies accountable and not do anything about cell phones. You have some school districts right now that prohibit cell phone usage while in school, others not so much. And then you have educators trying to enforce this while they're teaching. We think ban cell phones while kids are in school learning, and then get your cell phone afterwards. And then the third piece is, we said we wanted to help school districts fund some of this. We recognize that they can't do it on their own. So the Senate took more of the cell phone ban piece and less of the hold the tech companies accountable. We still want that. We think every part of the bill is important. The House is still working through that. We're talking through the conversations with them on all of these pieces. And then the governor also came out with ways in which to also join us in this effort. But I would encourage anyone who's listening, anyone in the audience, even if you don't have kids, the Study Act will be, if it's passed, a game changer when it comes to holding tech companies accountable, and we can do that through legislative solution, and it complements our current lawsuits, which can take longer.
And did the Senate strip the language around holding the tech companies accountable because some of them are owned by tech companies, or what was the argument about this?
I think there were different concerns they may have had around constitutionality, et cetera. And we have been pushing back to say we think it's constitutional. We think even this recent jury verdict in New Mexico could be helpful to our cause, because they have tried to stand behind a federal law to say, no, you can't come after us and hold us accountable for harms on our platform. We're exempt. And we're saying, no, you're not. And we've won at different stages. So we're going back into the State House to push folks and to say, we can do this, and we don't think it's a risk. We think it's absolutely constitutional as drafted. And we know the Study Act will be a game changer. And to your point, educators or anyone working in any schools welcome it because it's a major distraction to the learning of our kids. And in addition to that, we're seeing the uptick of complaints of bullying, harassment by kids who are harming each other using these platforms on their phones while they're sitting in a school. We have to do something about it.
Study Act, call your legislator, call your House member.
Thank you.
Stella in East Boston, thank you for calling. You're
Hi,
on with the
Stella.
Attorney General.
Hi, how are you? I'm wondering
Stella.
what is the deal with the pay-by-plate and the Easy Pass and the PAM, the collection agency? It's all state-run, and they're charging excessive amount of tolls. I asked for proof of debt. They sent me 37 pages that didn't make sense, and the Easy Pass customer service rep couldn't explain it to me either.
Stella,
It's
can you
excessive.
just
It was
stay on?
$712.
Okay, can you stay on? Because it sounds like it's a little specific too. Can you stay on? We can get your contact
Yeah.
and just follow up on this one.
Yeah,
And that way you don't get cut
Sure.
off too. But can you
Don't
stay
go
on?
away.
We'll
We're
follow
gonna-
up with
we'll
you on
get
this
your
particular
contact
case to
info.
help you navigate.
Stella, thanks for
This.
the call.
Thank you.
You know, and meanwhile, Attorney General, Democratic leaders up on Beacon Hill are pushing this legislation to fight back against Trump's mass deportation efforts, as the Globe puts it, including language that would ban federal immigration officers from making civil arrests in state courthouses. Are you involved in this?
Yes, the short answer is yes. And what I mean by that is we have the PROTECT Act, which includes some of that language. The governor also has some efforts. And then there are other legislators that also have efforts based on what they're seeing in terms of immigrant enforcement in the state. And so we're following all of it. It's all working its way through the State House. There are hearings that are coming up. But what we've made clear is we're informing different provisions of bills. We reviewed several iterations of different bills. Is that we want to support any legislative solutions that will help us protect our immigrant communities from the egregious tactics we're seeing in certain communities. And we think there are some good things in there.
We have time for one more quick one. Can we go to Rama in...
Didn't we already talk to Rama?
No, we didn't.
Oh,
in
we
Central
didn't.
Mass. Welcome
Sorry.
to the show, Rama. How are you? What's up? Got a minute?
Hi, thanks for squeezing me in. Yeah, I got a minute. I encourage everyone to read the state constitution, which I did. I found it at the Concord Library. I
Wow.
read it, and then I met with my state representative, and I got the addendum since it was written. There is nothing, absolutely nothing, in the Constitution that prohibits the it prohibits the auditor from doing her job and
Oh, back to
auditing
the
every
audit.
department. There is
So what's-
nothing.
That is
Legalese,
incorrect.
legalese,
What's your question?
legalese.
What's your question,
Well,
Rama?
my question is, why does the Attorney General keep going on with this? It's so frustrating. 72% of us.
You don't have to
voted
refer
for
to her
this.
in the third person. She's
Yes,
talking to
and
you
I'm
right
part
now.
of the
Attorney General,
72%,
why,
Rama.
why do you keep? It's legalese. It really
We
is.
got it.
John and Gardner said it well. My
Okay,
head's
we
spinning.
got it.
All of
We-
our heads are spinning.
we
Read
th-
the Constitution, everybody.
Read the Constitution.
I
but-
don't disagree, because we don't teach it in our schools, that's for sure. And you would learn something great about Massachusetts. Our Constitution is the oldest, and it informs the federal one. So it's really good. But that being said, even before the ballot question was put out, placed on the ballot, which we certified and approved, and I voted for, even before that, when the auditor attempted to audit the legislature, we sent her a letter, and maybe we send that out again, making explicit as to what some of those constitutional limitations were. And it wasn't just my interpretation. The office has been around since the 18th century. It was other interpretations, too, that made it crystal clear that there are constitutional limitations on auditing the legislature. But if the auditor calls me back, we will resolve it. And let me tell you, she didn't call me back. Instead, she sent an email through her lawyer to my lawyer, my team, and said she won't call me back, apparently. She's only going to work with us through her staff. Call me back. We can get this
You
done.
want a one-on-one meeting.
It doesn't even have to be in person. She can call me and
One-on-one,
get it
you
done.
and her.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And
Fair
we
enough.
can get this done.
Think the legislature should cancel their 5-month vacation this year and do some work? Thank you. Oh, we ran
Thank
out
you,
of
everyone,
time.
for having me.
Oh.
Stay blessed and
Good
healthy.
to see
And
you,
remember,
Attorney
you live and
General.
work in the best state in the country.